Now, I watched the PBS documentary on, on digital media and learning generally, and specifically on Quest to Learn. I thought it was really good. And one thing in particular was they interviewed a number of the students in your school, and they seemed very intelligent and articulate for such young kids.
Yeah.
So, how are what's been the reception like for the students? How are they reacting to it? It looks to me like it's very positive.
It is, and so we've only been open for 2 years, so I always am a little careful about what we talk about, but the kids are super engaged. Part of it is that they feel like pioneers, and they have been given agency from the very first day of school to talk to other people about what they're doing, what the school's about. So in some sense, they've been mini ambassadors from day one. And that has cultivated a sense in them that they are able to talk about the school, use the language of the school, and we talk to them with adult language. I mean, we don't dumb down the systems thinking stuff for sixth and seventh graders. And so as a result, I think they feel real ownership over the school.
There's a kind of stereotypical fear amongst parents, I think, that video games are just silly, or that kids are just goofing around all day. And how do you approach that? How do you get beyond that?
Right. Well, one reason we built the school is we felt like we needed to build more models to show people what this looks like. So when we talk about video games in school, what does that look like? So a lot of parents think it's a single kid sitting in front of a single screen, sort of staring slack-jawed at a screen. And what we're able to show them is the type of games that we designed for the school are incredibly collaborative. They're very rigorous. Kids are really working on complex problems. It has a lot of interesting kind of academic content that's coming out of it, as well as 21st century stuff. And so one way that we've been able to start to shift perceptions is to just show parents a different picture of what it looks like based on what they've imagined it looking like. Now, I have to say, when we talk about assessment, we don't separate it from learning. So we never talk about games and learning and then games and assessment.
Okay, so it's all the same.
It's the same. So we have been working with our teachers around a model of what we call embedded assessment, which is how games work. They embed the assessment in the play or the learning of the game itself. And so when we design curriculum that has game components to it, we never talk about, well, then there's going to be an assessment part. It's just part of the experience that we design for kids. And so there isn't a separate conversation with parents around assessment. Well, so one thing I'll say is that it's hard to talk about video games broadly. So there are video games that actually work like a standardized test.
Okay. Yeah,
so some qualities of a standardized test is that it's often about memorization. It's something that all kids receive the same exact questions in the same exact order. Where games, if you think about them as assessment spaces, they often allow for differences in choice about where a player might go, the types of problems that they might be working on. And so there's no comparison necessarily, direct comparison of kids' experiences. If the game is designed in the right way to assess the types of things that you want, the experiences don't have to be identical. And so when I said there are certain games, so drill and skill games, which are like multiple choice tests in a game, are actually like standardized tests. So when we talk about games broadly, I wouldn't necessarily talk about those as the best model for what we're talking about.
And specifically with regard to using games as a form of assessment, then what are some of the key arguments of people who don't agree that it's a useful tool?
Right, so I don't know that it's people that don't think it can be a tool. I think that they don't fully understand how it can be a tool. So I think there's still an enormous amount of work to be done to show examples of what we're talking about that don't exist in the kind of commercial entertainment space. So when we talk about, well, Portal is an amazing game, it assesses what a player does around X, Y, or Z, there still needs to be a lot of translation for education people around, well, what are the specific competencies, how do those get measured? And I think that the challenge is that there's just a long history of kids doing things and then getting a test taken afterwards, and a test that looks the same for all kids. And that's the notion of standardized. So that's the biggest argument, is if things aren't standardized, how will they be able to compare and sort kids? And so it's a philosophical argument that we have to move people from a belief that it's actually okay to standardize and sort kids. And I think what the games and assessment movement is starting to say is that kids can be assessed in different ways around different kinds of abilities and different kinds of skills and knowledge. It can actually happen in context while kids are learning rather than sort of after the fact.